Most people think the loudest person in the room is the one holding the power. They think success belongs to the bold, the flashy, the ones who never stop shouting about their wins. But sometimes, it's the quiet one in the corner. The one they overlooked, doubted, underestimated. Who's been holding the real cards all along? I'm Avery Chen. And just a few months ago, my own family tried to sabotage my career. Believing I was just a mid-level executive barely hanging on. They whispered behind my back. They sent anonymous tips. They even plotted my downfall, thinking it would be easy, thinking I was weak. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't just another employee at Vertex Biolabs. I was the owner. And by the time they found out, the trap they had set for me had already closed around themselves. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about patience, strategy, and the quiet kind of strength that changes everything. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you're too quiet to succeed, stay with me. Because what happened next will remind you. The quiet ones? We don't shout to be heard. We move in silence. And we win. Growing up, I was the quiet one. The easy child. The one who didn't need constant attention, didn't throw tantrums, didn't cause trouble. At every family gathering, my parents beamed over my younger brother Ethan's latest achievement, his sports trophies, his new internships, his bright future in business. Meanwhile, I sat in the background, quietly excelling at school, quietly earning scholarships, quietly dreaming bigger than anyone could imagine. While Ethan had the luxury of focus, I juggled 3 part-time jobs to stay afloat at Georgia Tech, tutoring, coding side gigs, even lab assistant shifts late into the night. Nobody cheered when I pulled all-nighters for finals. Nobody clapped when I built my first prototype in a tiny rented lab. But that's the thing about being invisible. It teaches you how to build without applause. How to stay focused without needing validation. How to turn your silence into strength. By the time I turned 30, I had launched and sold 2 biotech startups. Not that anyone in my family knew. I deliberately kept my name out of the headlines, funneled earnings through trusts, and stayed out of the spotlight. Because I understood something early on. When people think you have nothing, they reveal who they really are. That decision, to stay invisible, allowed me to move differently. It gave me the space to build an empire from the shadows, without interference, without expectations. And most importantly, without limits. And when the opportunity to quietly acquire Vertex Biolabs appeared, I didn't need anyone's permission. I didn't ask for advice. I just moved. Silently. Deliberately. Powerfully. Because sometimes, the ones they underestimate the most become the ones they can never catch. And as I was about to learn, underestimation isn't just a disadvantage. It's a weapon. If you know how to wield it. Which brings me to the first signs of betrayal. Small cracks in the mask my family wore so well. Let's talk about that moment. When loyalty revealed itself to be an illusion. People often say, if you're doing something great, the world should know. But I learned early that sometimes, the greatest strength is staying unseen. Especially when the people closest to you mistake your quiet for weakness. While Ethan posted every minor promotion, every vacation, every new car on social media, I stayed silent. Not because I was ashamed, but because I understood. Visibility invites expectations. Expectations invite control. When I started building my second biotech company, I registered it under a different entity name. When profits came in, I split them across multiple trusts and investments, all managed discreetly through legal channels. No LinkedIn posts. No family announcements. No flashing lights. And when I joined Vertex Biolabs as a mid-level strategist, it wasn't because I needed a job. It was because I saw something others didn't. An undervalued giant with limitless potential. I spent months studying their leadership, their weaknesses, their untapped opportunities. Patiently. quietly. Then, using a web of trusts and private holdings, I began acquiring shares, one transaction at a time. Until 2 months ago, I became the majority owner. No news article. No celebration dinner. Not even a whisper. Because the truth is, when you build in silence, no one can sabotage what they don't even see coming. It wasn't about secrecy for pride. It was about strategy for survival. And ironically, the very thing they thought made me weak, my quietness, my independence, became the armor that made me unstoppable. But power, even when earned quietly, has a way of disturbing those who are used to standing on your shoulders. And it wasn't long before Ethan, and the family that always underestimated me, decided it was time to remind me of my place. Except this time, they had no idea whose kingdom they were trying to burn down. Next, let's step into that first moment, the first crack, when betrayal began to reveal itself. At first, it was subtle. A comment here, a sideways glance there. After I was named Chief Strategy Officer at Vertex Biolabs, family dinners shifted. The congratulations felt hollow. The smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. "You sure you're ready for this?" Ethan asked one night, poking at his steak. "Corporate leadership is a whole different beast than, tinkering in labs." Mom chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet. "Maybe Ethan can mentor you a bit, sweetheart. He's been managing people for years." I smiled. Politely. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just stepping into a leadership role. I already owned the company they thought I was barely qualified to work for. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That their words were just careless, not malicious. That maybe, deep down, they really did want the best for me. But then Ethan started showing up at my workplace. Unannounced lunches with department heads. Casual coffee chats with mid-level managers. Friendly concern masked as checking in on how his overwhelmed sister was adjusting. And soon after, rumors started trickling in. Anonymous tips to HR questioning my credentials. Anonymous emails hinting at improprieties in my background. Every accusation was baseless. Every rumor easily disproven. But it didn't matter. The goal wasn't to find the truth. It was to plant the seed of doubt. And that's when it hit me. Family loyalty is a beautiful concept. Until loyalty threatens their place in the hierarchy. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who can't stand to see you rise higher than they ever imagined. It wasn't about whether I was good enough. It was about the fact that my success disrupted the story they told themselves. That Ethan was the star, and I was the quiet backup. It hurt. Of course it did. But it also clarified something I had been too sentimental to accept. Not everyone in your circle is in your corner. And sometimes, family loyalty is only real when you're not a threat. Still, I waited. Because the best counterpunch isn't thrown in anger. It's delivered at exactly the right time. And that time was coming sooner than any of them realized. Let's talk about how betrayal sometimes hands you the perfect stage, if you know how to use it. I used to think betrayal would feel like a lightning strike. Sudden, violent, impossible to miss. But the truth? It creeps in like a slow leak, so quiet you almost convince yourself it's not happening. Until one day, you look down and realize you're standing in deep water. And the damage is already done. The night before it all came crashing down, an envelope arrived at the board of directors. Sealed. Anonymous. Inside? A polished dossier filled with forged documents. Fake bank statements, altered emails, even fabricated timelines designed to paint me as a fraud. Accusations of embezzlement. Insider trading. Falsifying research reports. It was a masterclass in malicious creativity. And it didn't take a detective to guess who was behind it. Ryan Ethan had made his move. The board called for an emergency meeting the next morning. Rumors flew. Emails buzzed. The atmosphere at Vertex Biolabs crackled with tension. I imagine Ethan spent that night celebrating quietly. Picturing the boardroom confrontation. Imagining the look on my face when I was publicly humiliated, escorted out, credentials stripped, reputation ruined. But what he didn't know, what he could never have guessed, was that while he was plotting my downfall, I had been preparing my reveal. For months, I had been documenting every whisper campaign, every manipulative move, every false narrative he spun. Emails, security footage, recorded conversations, all meticulously preserved. And even more importantly, I was ready to lift the veil on the true ownership of Vertex Biolabs. No more secrets. No more silence. Because sometimes, betrayal doesn't break you. It hands you the microphone you've been waiting for. It gives you the perfect stage, the perfect audience, and the perfect opportunity to show exactly who you've become while everyone else was too busy underestimating you. The pieces were already in place. The trap wasn't for me. It was for them. And when the clock struck 9 a.m. the next morning, I didn't walk into that boardroom as a victim. I walked in as the owner. And the look on Ethan's face when he realized it, that was worth every quiet, patient step that brought me here. Next, let's step into that boardroom together and watch everything shift. The conference room was cold, the kind of cold that comes not from air conditioning but from tension thick enough to cut through. I could feel their eyes on me, board members shifting uncomfortably, my parents whispering anxiously, and Ethan, smirking, confident, ready to watch me fall. Marcus, the board chair, cleared his throat. These allegations against Miss Chen are extremely serious. Sorry I'm late, I said casually, stepping into the room. Every head turned. Ethan's face twitched, confusion flickering across his smug expression. This is a closed session, he snapped, glancing at Marcus. She shouldn't even be here. I smiled calmly and took my seat at the head of the table. Actually, I should. Because it's a little hard to hold a board meeting without the owner of the company. The silence that followed was electric. Shock spread across the room like a ripple in still water. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. Mom blinked rapidly. Dad paled as if he had seen a ghost. What are you talking about? Ethan barked, clinging to his script. Vertex Biolabs is publicly owned. I nodded to Nina, my assistant, who began passing out folders. It was. Until 2 months ago, when it was quietly acquired by Chen Strategic Holdings. Would you like to guess who owns that? The color drained from Ethan's face as he flipped through the documents. Every signature. Every transaction. Every carefully orchestrated move I'd made in silence. Still, he tried to recover. This is insane. You can't possibly afford, you're just a lab geek. Just a coder. I smiled, the kind of small, quiet smile that says, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Yes, Ethan, I said gently. You've made that clear your entire life. But let's hear what else you've been saying. I nodded again. Nina tapped her tablet, and the room filled with Ethan's voice, recorded snippets of conversations he thought were private. His doubts. His scheming. His insults, hidden under fake concern. Every manipulation. Every lie. Played back in surround sound. The board shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs filled the room. And then, I laid the final card down. The envelope Ethan had sent to the board, filled with falsified documents, fabrications, desperate attempts to smear my name. Did you really think no one would verify any of this before taking action? I asked, voice calm but sharp. Ethan sputtered, desperate now. I was trying to protect the company. You're not a real leader. You don't deserve to be here. I met his eyes without flinching. No, Ethan. You're right about one thing. I don't just deserve to be here. I built this. The room was heavy with realization. The betrayal. The underestimation. The cost. I wasn't the one they needed to worry about. I was the one they worked for. And for the first time, Ethan, my parents, the entire room. They finally saw me not as the quiet girl in the corner, but as the woman holding the keys to everything they had tried to control. And believe me, I wasn't done yet. Because after the reveal comes the reckoning. Let's talk about what happens when the people you love fail the biggest test of all. After the recording stopped, there was a long, hollow silence. The kind that feels heavier than any shouting match ever could. My parents sat frozen, their faces crumbling under the weight of reality. The golden son they had always believed in, the one they had propped up, praised, and protected, was the architect of their daughter's public execution attempt. And yet, even then, their first instinct wasn't to hold Ethan accountable. It was to beg for forgiveness. "Surely you won't ruin your brother's life over this, Avery," Mom said, tears streaking her mascara. "We're family." Family. The word echoed in my mind, foreign and hollow. Where was this loyalty when Ethan was forging documents? Where was this love when they chose to believe in my failure instead of my success? I stood slowly, letting the silence stretch. "You say we're family," I said quietly. "But family doesn't plot your downfall behind closed doors. Family doesn't cheer for your collapse." Dad raised a trembling hand. "We just wanted what's best for you," he mumbled weakly. "No," I said, voice firm but not angry. "You wanted what made you comfortable. You wanted the daughter who stayed small, so the sun could keep shining." Ethan stared at me, something almost like regret flickering across his face, but not enough. Not enough to undo the choices he made. I turned to the board. "I'm not here today to destroy my family," I said. "I'm here to protect this company. And to make sure that loyalty, real loyalty, is the foundation we move forward on." I requested that the board issue an official reprimand of Ethan's misconduct, permanently banning him from company property and any involvement in future operations. I made it clear that forgiveness might come in time, but trust would have to be earned from scratch. Ethan tried one last time as security escorted him from the building. "I'm sorry," he called after me, desperate. I was jealous. I just wanted to matter too. I didn't reply. Because sometimes silence is the only answer. That day, walking out of the boardroom, I realized something vital. You don't truly know who's in your corner until standing by you costs them something. The people who stood by me when they thought I had nothing, they were the ones who deserved a seat at my table. The others? They had chosen their side long before today. And while it hurt, oh, it hurt, there was a strange kind of peace in the clarity. Next, let's talk about what rebuilding looks like. Not just a company, but a life. After betrayal clears the way for something better. The days after the boardroom showdown felt strange. Like stepping out of a storm into a world you barely recognize. For the first time, the halls of Vertex Biolabs felt different. Not because of who left, but because of who stayed. The real ones. The employees who'd quietly believed in me long before titles and ownership papers came into play. The team members who didn't care about family names or flashy LinkedIn profiles. They cared about the work, about the mission, about building something meaningful. And it became crystal clear. You don't rebuild an empire with the loudest voices. You rebuild it with the truest hearts. We restructured leadership. We rewrote the mission statement to reflect integrity, transparency, and innovation. We started a scholarship fund for first-generation STEM students because I knew exactly what it felt like to fight uphill without a safety net. Instead of spending time fighting shadows, we spent time building futures. And slowly, something beautiful began to happen. The same people who once whispered doubts now spoke with pride. The departments that once operated in silos started collaborating like never before. Vertex Biolabs didn't just recover. It flourished. Revenue climbed. New partnerships formed. And for the first time in company history, employee satisfaction hit an all-time high. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't overnight. It was real. And real things take time. I realized something during those months. Betrayal might burn down the old structure. But if you have the courage to clear the ashes, you get to rebuild something even stronger. Not a castle built on illusions, but a home built on truth. A place where loyalty isn't demanded, it's earned. And where success doesn't have to be shouted from the rooftops, because it's stitched into the very fabric of who you are. But the journey wasn't over, because there was still one final chapter waiting. One I never expected. The day Ethan came back, not for revenge, not for manipulation, but for something much rarer. Accountability. Let's step into that moment together. Because sometimes redemption comes in the quietest ways. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Layla, my assistant, buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." I glanced at my calendar, no appointments. Still, something in her voice made me pause. "Send them in," I said. A few seconds later, Ethan stepped through the door. But he wasn't the polished, cocky version I remembered. Gone were the designer suits and arrogant smile. He wore a plain button-down, sleeves slightly wrinkled, hair shorter, eyes hollow but clear. In his hand, a manila envelope, heavy, weathered, trembling slightly. He didn't sit. He didn't posture. He just stood there, rain dripping from his jacket. "I'm not staying," he said quickly, voice low. "I just need to say something." He placed the envelope gently on my desk. "It's everything," he said. "Every password, every contact, every scheme I pulled. I'm also sending confessions to the board and my old employer. No excuses." For a moment, I just stared at the envelope. At the life he was choosing to dismantle with his own hands. "Why now?" I finally asked. He swallowed hard. "Because you were right," he said simply. "I wasn't building anything real. I spent so long trying to be the star that I forgot how to be a decent human being." He shifted his weight, like the words themselves were heavier than he expected. "I'm starting over," he continued. "Entry level. Small startup. No shortcuts this time. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. Letting me fall was the kindest thing anyone's ever done for me." He turned to leave, hand already on the door. "Ethan," I called softly. He looked back, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Send me your resume, in a year," I said, my voice steady. "Not for a leadership role. Not a shortcut. But if you're serious about earning your place. We're always looking for people willing to build from the ground up." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he nodded, a single tear slipping down his cheek, and walked out without another word. I sat there, staring at the envelope he left behind. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a clean slate. But maybe it was something even more powerful. Accountability. Because sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with grand apologies or second chances handed out like candy. Sometimes it comes quietly, clothed in humility, asking for nothing more than the chance to try again. And that's a beginning worth respecting. Next, let's close this story by talking about what real success and real peace actually look like. 6 months passed in what felt like a blink. Vertex Biolabs didn't just recover, it soared. We launched new research initiatives, expanded into international markets, and most importantly, rebuilt a culture rooted in trust, not fear. The office buzzed with new energy. People smiled more. Collaboration flourished. And I found myself loving the work again, not because I had to prove something, but because it mattered. Mom and Dad still sent occasional texts, usually around holidays or big news cycles. Polite. careful, distant. I answered when it felt right. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just because some bridges aren't meant to be burned. They're simply better left untraveled. As for Ethan, I heard through the grapevine that he stuck to his word. Working long hours at a tiny startup, climbing the ladder the honest way. No shortcuts. No schemes. Just effort and humility. A few weeks ago, I found a card on my desk. No fanfare. Just simple handwriting. You succeeded not because of us, but despite us. I'm learning to do the same. No apology. No excuses. Just quiet acknowledgement. And somehow, it was enough. Because here's the truth they never tell you. Success isn't about shouting louder than everyone else. It's about standing steady when the noise tries to drown you out. It's not the corner office or the title on the door. It's knowing you built something real. Something that doesn't need applause to exist. Something no one can take away. Success isn't loud. It's solid. It's earned. It's peaceful. Today, when I walk through the halls of the company I built in silence, I don't hear whispers of doubt anymore. I hear footsteps. Momentum. A future. Not just for me, but for everyone who ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or underestimated themselves. And if you're on your own journey right now, building quietly, working late nights no one claps for, I want you to hear this loud and clear. Keep going. Keep building. Your quiet strength will one day be the loudest thing in the room. Because success doesn't have to roar. Sometimes, the strongest power is the one that never needed to shout at all. And that, my friends, is the real story. Not about revenge. Not about taking people down. But about standing tall, building quietly, and letting your work speak for itself. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's this. You don't need to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. You only need to prove it to yourself. Every late night. Every quiet sacrifice. Every moment you chose to keep moving forward when no one was watching. Those are the building blocks of a life no one can tear down. It's easy to crave recognition. It's tempting to want applause. But real success, it isn't loud. It's steady. It's earned quietly in the spaces no one else notices. Until one day, they can't ignore it anymore. And when that day comes, you won't need to shout. You'll simply stand there, solid and unshakable, because you know. You built this. You earned this. You became this. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the quiet one underestimated or overlooked, I would love to hear your journey. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the quiet dream you're building? What's the success you're patiently crafting behind the scenes? If you found inspiration here today, hit that like button, subscribe for more real stories about resilience, growth, and true power. And share this with someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength is still strength. Remember, you don't need their permission to shine. You were always meant to. And your time? It's coming.